And you run creatine in your diet kind of as a regular thing. I was going to say ketamine, which is exactly not what I mean.
I might do that before we race, actually.
Do it. We'll do it on the morning of the race.
What could possibly go wrong?
So explain this to me. You're 3 kilos heavier than me, and you're running the same fork pressure with 0 spaces in the fork.
0 tokens, yeah. I've got a theory on this, though.
Come on, then.
So,
all right, it's race week for race 1 of Downtime Goes Downhill, and I'm back again with Jonathan and Ben. We're going to catch up on what we've been up to in the last few weeks, kind of finishing up our training ahead of this race and getting our bikes ready to rock. Let's start with training. And Johnny, maybe we'll start with you. What have you been up to since we last spoke? How have you sort of sharpened the pencil, so to speak, for this weekend?
So not long after the first podcast, I finished the 12-week block of training on the Wahoo, and which was a 4DP full frontal test, which I wasn't really looking forward to, but I was kind of, well, I wasn't, because I wanted to see what the numbers were. But I knew full well how disgusting it was going to be. So I did it, and numbers have gone up across the board, about like 25 to 30% across all the measures. And it wasn't as disgusting as the first time. So it was still...
Were you not trying hard enough?
No, I was. And I was better. I think I was better at the pacing because I knew what to do.
Yeah.
I had a much better idea of where I wanted to be in terms of like trying to be above. They give you something to aim for, and it's basically where you are at the moment. So I was like, right, I'll just push above, and especially on the FTP ones where you're looking to kind of maintain something for a long length of time. So I was like, push it above, and it had already up because halfway through I'd done a ramp test, and that had adjusted the numbers, which was good because I was finding things quite easy as I'd progressed. So
the workouts get too easy, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I'd already started upping it manually. So that was good. And then, so I aimed for that. And then on the other aspects of which were anaerobic threshold and maximum anaerobic. Oh, I'm getting them all mixed up. Maximum aerobic capacity and anaerobic threshold. Those all went up, as well as the sprinting one, which was the neuromuscular. And I know some people out there on the internet will say, well, none of this matters for downhill. But if you want to improve, you've got to measure something. So this is...
And it's easy to measure in the system that we've got, right?
Yeah, and there's 4 different things, and all of them, I think, do relate to, especially at our level, to going downhill racing. And I don't think I mentioned it on the last podcast, but the reason I wanted to do this level of training was I wanted to get the most out of the racing in terms of enjoyment. And that means being fit enough to do a full weekend of racing, which means, especially on the Pierce, it's a day of practice and then a morning of practice and then 2 race runs. And you're being asked the most of yourself at the end of that 2-day period. So I wanted to be fit enough to kind of, have a good go and not feel as if I was absolutely ruined after the weekend. So definitely.
It's not just about the race run, right? It's not just about the sprint out the gate or whatever. It's being able to ride all weekend. And it's the same at a World Cup, right? Even at that level, you need to have a good base fitness to be able to get through a week of riding.
The recovery, you need to be able to kind of recover day to day reasonably well. And I feel as if, I've done that. I did 2 days back-to-back riding this week, and I was all right. It was, it's worked. Let's
nice.
just say.
So numbers are up across the board. What about the strength side of stuff? You've been again going your own way on that.
Yeah. So I did something quite specific, really. So I've dabbled in quite a few things over probably the last 10 years since I lived in Australia. I did a lot of, back in the day, I did some like normal barbell stuff like deadlift, squat, and then I transitioned from that to doing some Olympic style lifts. And then latterly, I've just kind of like moved to something that's kind of just more kind of functional in terms of I wanted to make sure that I was strong through full range of movement, that I included a lot of asymmetric stuff, which I know Ben mentioned recently, Ben playing, and a lot of eccentric and concentric exercises. So not just push, but pull. I did a lot of like shoulder work with bands. And then latterly, I've kind of transitioned from that to being a slightly more kind of explosive with like kettlebell swings and snatches and that type of stuff. So nothing, nothing groundbreaking, nothing, but more doing stuff that I know works well for me, having done it for quite a long time.
Yeah. And you run creatine in your diet kind of as a regular thing. I was going to say ketamine, which is exactly not what I mean.
Yeah. Just, there just seems to be no downside for adding it in. There's lots of stuff that shows on a long-term basis. There's cognitive benefits and protection that it provides, as well as the element it provides for training, coupled with other things like omega-3s and, those kind of simple supplementation seems to be the way to go.
Do you notice the impact of creatine either in like the bulk that you carry around, because it can make you absorb more or hold more water, I think, and also like the repeat power stuff? No.
Okay. If I was more at a level where, I was more nuanced, maybe, but, I don't really notice that, to be honest.
Yeah, interesting. Because I started it again about 4 weeks ago, probably. I haven't had it for a while. And I definitely notice it when I start taking it again when I'm doing intervals. I find intervals are not easier, but like the ability to repeat and like maintain power throughout a set of intervals, I find improves when I'm having creatine as part of like a regular thing, which, it just seems, whereas previously like intervals, I'd be able to go hard initially, but I'd drop off on like interval 9 or 10 or something, and you'd see the power drop. I find it a lot easier to be consistent, but
that's interesting. I guess because I was coming from such a low base, it's almost like from week to week I'd be seeing progression. So, that everything could be just lost in that progression. There's all sorts of things I could do, whatever during the week, and I'd still see progression just because I'd been putting in those hours.
Yeah, you've been on the steep part of the curve.
Yeah. It will all slow down from now on.
I was going to say, do you feel like that has started to slow, or do you still feel like you're on a fairly positive, quick progression?
I've not really thought about it too much. I think, some of the things that I was doing, it's maintaining that for a long period of time, which is going to have the true benefits. It's weird, so when you finish these tests on the Wahoo, they give you this profile breakdown with nice graphics, and I'll stick them up on Instagram, I guess, so people can see. But you can see how you've improved, and the numbers have gone up, 30%, say, on my sprinting. It doesn't feel that much different. It still feels disgusting. But the power's better, and I think the other thing is that it's not that this is a new level for me. I've just bringing myself back up to a level I was at, kind of thing. Yeah. So, it doesn't feel that much different when I do these things, I guess.
Are you, are you surprised by how much stuff's gone up by, or was that what you're expecting? Or?
No, I had no expectation. I was like, you know what? If I get closer to you guys, I was like, you know what? I'm a fair way off. If I get back closer to you guys, that's all I was kind of looking for. And I feel like I'm, I don't know where you guys are at the moment, but I think roughly.
I haven't got a clue.
Roughly, I'm a bit closer. So,
I think you might be above, to be fair. Like I'll talk about it in a bit. I made a little bit of progress, but maybe not as much. So
I have to say, touch wood, I have not been as ill as you two have. So that definitely works to my favour.
You do seem to have managed to swerve that one, or just are living a healthier lifestyle. One of the two. Don't know. Go on then, Ben. Tell us about your side, because last time we spoke, you were like coming off the back of a month or so of throat infection and various things.
So I'm back to full health now. I've been fine since then, which is nice. So I'd focus more on the strength side of things using Ben's program, and I was on the sort of like foundation program, which usually takes 2 months, but because I'd been ill through the second month, spoke to him and sort of decided to go back to the start of the second month and repeat all that really. So I've just coming up to the end of that now, and it's hard to sort of it's hard to sort of identify the progress you've made there. I mean, I can see that I'm sort of lifting heavier weights, but then you sort of and all of this, it tends to run as like sets of 2 exercises. One's usually leg based, one's usually arm based. So you can do the leg one, do the arm one, have a bit of a break between them, but then you've had a chance to recover to repeat the next sets. So I'm moving heavier weights, but then you sort of drop down the number of reps and then lift up the reps. So those sort of progressing on that front. There's other things that I've noticed, like I was telling you guys, I could touch my toes. I haven't been able to. That's amazing. Been able to touch my toes for like decades, probably. And when I first measured, like you do a mobility assessment at the start of the program, and I was 14 centimeters away from being able to touch my toes. So I could touch my toes now. So
for real? That's massive progress, mate. That's awesome.
Really, that's just from the warm-up stretches, I think. Just regularly doing that. So that's brilliant. I've got like a shoulder injury, from a broken collarbone and various other things on that shoulder. And that's always a bit sore and often disturb my sleep, and that's starting to improve. Out on the trails, I don't know, I feel a bit stronger, feel like I can throw things around a bit more, but it's difficult to say whether that's, it's probably from being in better shape. But I just generally overall, I feel a lot better. I think it's benefiting me psychologically, just because I'm doing some exercise pretty much every day, and I think that's just good for you. You know, I'm at the gym twice a week, a couple of normal rides, get on the Wahoo for only a short session a couple of times a week, but then you're doing something every day basically.
Are you using the Wahoo for like interval stuff, or like how are you
just using the Wahoo for intervals? So I've focused on the sprint power. I haven't done any. I think I've done 2 tests. The second test was a couple of months ago, and was about the same as the first. Really, hadn't really changed.
Yeah, but you'd had that big period of illness in between, right?
I think that was maybe around. I can't remember when that one. It might have even been before the illness. I think that I did the second test. But I haven't really focused on that. I'll be surprised if it's changed that much, to be honest. But I'll keep working on that test at some point.
Do you notice any change in your physique? Like when I train a lot, I definitely feel like I can feel additional muscle in my back.
Yeah,
like the wing kind of thing starting to appear. But
and there's nothing visual. I wouldn't say. You still get that. Like sometimes you'll do a session at the gym and you're like, whoa, I didn't know I had muscles in that part of my body. Or like the day after, they'll be feeling a bit sore. So next stage now in terms of the gym stuff is to move on to the full downhill program. But you know, that's fair.
You could do some baseline stuff before you get too stuck in. Like I remember doing something with Ben where it was like 3 or 4 exercises where you go pretty heavy and like do a max reps thing, and then come back to it in like 12 weeks or whatever, and see where your reps are at with the same weight after that, just to give yourself like that whole, I don't know, it's like a little pat on the back in it when you know that you can see the progress. Because like you say, when the reps change week on week or month on month, even if you're doing the same exercise, it's hard to know, like, have I moved on or whatever? I'm lifting heavier, but it's lower reps or whatever. But yeah, if you're feeling good mentally and physically, that's got to be a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Another thing that like it's not really a training benefit, but the start of each of those sessions, you do a little like self-assessment. Are you know, what's your sleep like? What's your stress levels like? How sore are you? What's your mood like? And just doing, like, actually stopping and thinking about those things a couple of times a week has been really interesting. And it's made me think about certain areas of my life where I can make changes, in particular the sleep, which we all know is super important. You can go out and train as hard as you like, but if you're not sleeping and allowing your body that recovery, you're going to restrict the benefits. So I've sort of, it's prompted me to make some changes in our like daily routine. So like we've all got kids. When your kids are young, you lose sleep because they're keeping you up in the night. And now what's happened now, my kids are a bit older, they're like into their teens nearly. They go to bed really late, so they're keeping me up because I've been up like getting them to bed. So we've made a couple of little changes so that I'm making sure that I get to bed at the right time each night, and
cool.
Yeah, seeing some benefits from that as well. So
nice. It's a little bit like journaling. When you start journaling on various things, you start noticing patterns and seeing things. I guess it's a similar thing, but for like the fitness aspect. So it's cool. That's helped you pick up other things in life that might have gone unnoticed, maybe. Nice.
And how about you, Chris?
So I sort of got through that period of illness in, when was it, like March time. I felt like I was pretty much ill the whole of March, and touch wood, have stayed pretty good. I had a little bit of a 3 or 4 days where I didn't feel quite right, but it didn't really turn into anything. But other than that, yeah, been pretty consistent. I did a ramp test to check the max aerobic power, because that was the one. So the 4DP test that we've all done on the Wahoo, like, shows you how each of those 4 elements compare and shows you, like, are they balanced or are you kind of super weak in one area? And the max aerobic power was the one that it flagged for me. And I could luckily do that, retest that in the ramp rather than having to do the whole full frontal test. And that was up, I can't remember, like, I want to say 10 or 15%, which was reasonable given what I'd been through with illness. And it measures FTP as well, which was only up a little bit, like a couple of percent maybe, but up's better than nothing. And it's 2 different tests, so like whether there's any sort of slight inconsistencies between the 2 tests, I don't know. So that was good. I should probably go and do a 4DP at some point, but I haven't brought myself to do it just yet because the first one was so painful. And I'm definitely not going to do it on the week of the race because it takes a bit of recovering from. And then otherwise, I've focused, for a few reasons, I guess, I've focused on bike time above everything else at the moment. I think I personally will benefit the most. Like, I think I can increase my ability to go fast at the race more at the moment by riding a bike more off-road than I can in a gym, kind of thing. Because I think I'm in a reasonable condition and I'm not going to get much quicker, like much fitter between now and then, but I definitely can like sharpen my riding up a bit. So I've still been doing 1 strength session a week to try and keep that going and not lose anything. And I've also probably done like 1 interval session every week and a half, again, just to try and keep that side of things, like, not to give my body any like excuse to let that stuff go, because you don't want to lose all the gains that you made. And then, yeah, I've just been out on bikes quite a lot, whether that's been like downhill bike, trail bike, e-bike, just trying to ride and spend some hours outside because the weather's been reasonable. Like, trails have on occasion been hero dirt, occasionally slop and occasionally dry. But it's been good, I think. I've seen, like, I'm not a big fan of Strava, but my rides, like from Wahoo, I connected it to Strava, so they do upload there. And my times on various stages and bits and pieces have been going down. So that's a good thing, I think. Like, and just starting to feel more confident on the bike. Like, I had a bit of a wobble back end of last year where I had a bad ride and started to doubt my ability, and it's taken me a while to come back from that. I think we're getting there. I've been keeping a riding journal. I think I told you guys, I can't remember. So I like try and write down before I go out, like maybe 3 aims for the ride. Like, what do I want to achieve? And then like on the ride, I try and reflect on the positives at the bottom of the run rather than the negatives, and try and like give myself like positive thoughts rather than like, oh, I messed that up, or I didn't do that well, or I didn't commit there. Because there are always highs and lows to any kind of time you ride down a hill on a bike. I think it's never always bad, always good. So yeah, try to focus on the good stuff, and then like come home from the ride, write down 3 things that I'm like stoked about, and then 1 thing that maybe I could like look to improve at. And it's creating, I'm quite evidence-based, I think. Like I can't just convince myself that I'm amazing at something. I have to like prove to myself that I can do it. So like this journal is becoming like a repository of evidence that I can ride a bike, like not too badly. Hopefully we'll find out next weekend. But yeah, so that's been really good, eh? Like it's been nice to be outside a lot more. And you know, I moved here back end of last year as well. I'm still like learning my way around, learning the trails, learning the terrain. So that's been really cool to do more of that. Been catching up with a friend of ours, Tim, who lives like just over the other side of a big hill. So he's been kind of coming back to riding via the gift of e-bikes, which has been pretty life-changing for him, I think. So it's been nice. We've hung out a bit and got some rides done. So it's been good. And then everything was going well. And then I had a bike maintenance injury. So I leads us into bike setup, I guess. But I decided that I'm just copying the Canyon factory team. So I looked at Troy and Luca's bike, and I'm just doing everything they've done, because they must have done more testing than me. I think it's a good plan. They're both running O chains, and I've spoken to a few people as well and said, yeah, it's definitely worth trying an O chain. I've got one on the Kotick. I really like it. So I wanted to put one on the Canyon and give it a try. But the crank was on so tight that like I was, you know, jumping on things, using an extension, all sorts to try and get it off. In the end, I got a professional mechanic who lives around the corner to come round, and the two of us, with a lot of body weight between the two of us, thrown at the bike. We did get it off, but I managed to jack my shoulder and my neck in the process, which is not ideal. So it's getting there. It's nearly back to normal. And I was able to ride through it. It was just pretty sore, and I was riding really weird and stiff because I couldn't properly look where I was going or turn corners. Yeah, but other than that, all good, I think. Feel like I'm in a pretty good spot. Hard to know because I haven't ridden with that many people that I know well, like that I have a sort of baseline against for fitness. Like there's certain people, I don't know about you guys, but yeah, I have people that I know like roughly how fit they are compared to me. And if I go for a ride with them and then suddenly I'm like faster than them, I know that I'm progressing well.
Yeah, okay.
And I've not ridden with any of that like group of people for the last couple of months, so hard to be sure.
The clock will tell us
We'll
next
see.
weekend.
The clock will tell us.
We don't have to ride up the hills though.
Well, no, that's true. But again, it's about getting through the weekend, right? Can you do a whole day of downhill and still be able to ride safely towards the end of the day? Because your focus goes, you start to get weak on the bike. Like a mistake that you might have been able to ride out of and like push yourself out of the bike early in the day, you might crumple. So there's that. And then, yeah, just like recovering and being ready to ride again the next day. So we'll see how we get on. But yeah, bike setup is the other big one, right? It's the bit to make us feel comfortable and maybe get some like free speed, I guess. Ben, we'll start with you because you've gone a more organic route, I guess. Tell us a bit about your riding and your process over the last few weeks to get the bike into a spot that you're happy with.
I feel slightly on the back foot on this one.
What would that be?
We've had a lot of discussions about this. Partly from just being busy with other stuff, and like, you know, we've had a couple of long weekends where I've not been able to ride because I've had other commitments.
It's been a bank holiday month, isn't it?
So I think I was thinking before we started, the initial problem I had was that the bike came with a spring that was way too stiff, and I stepped it down one spring and that felt way too stiff, though I'm so totally lost with it now. God knows whether that's the right spring or not. So then I've gone down another spring size, which feels a lot more like the right rate. But that's taken alongside being ill, etc. It means I've had 2 setup rides basically on the bike now. And the first one was really kind of just getting it roughly in the right spot, I suppose. Front end feels great. Forks I'm quite happy with. But the back end, don't know if the spring's too soft. Don't know where I am with the setting. Well, I know where I am with the settings, but I don't know if they're right or not. Had pretty limited opportunity to test it out on various different sets of terrain. So I've had one session, and this will be the final session before we race this weekend, and it feels good. It feels in a nice place. But I've just got this nagging feeling in the back of my mind that once it feels good, but it feels like the back end feels like it's maybe at the limit of the spring at this point, and I'm a bit concerned that once we get on some properly fast terrain and start pushing it at race pace, there might not be that little margin of error left.
What sag are you on at the moment?
Yeah,
do you know?
it's just under 30%. So we're aiming at
should be all right.
Yeah, it don't have, I mean, Johnny will say more about suspension setup shortly. It feels good. It feels like a downhill bike, because when I first got on it, it didn't. It was way too stiff at the back. It felt like a trail bike really at the back end. The grip's bonkers. It pings in and out of switchbacks and stuff. Feels great, but we'll see. There's been
Did you find it quite overwhelming? Because we were on the Fox 40 and the Fox coil on the back, and that means we've got obviously spring rate in both pressure front and spaces, and then spring in the rear, plus high speed, low speed compression, high speed, low speed rebound. It's a lot. It's great to have that flexibility, but it is it's a big puzzle, right? Because there's a lot of variables,
a lot of permutations there.
It is. I think I could handle that. It's the main difficulty I have is I'm so used to an air shock where you've got an O-ring on the shaft and you're so you'd be out riding, you're like, what? There's some bang from the back end. You're like, is that bottoming out? Is that the coil, coil binding? Because I've put too much preload on. Is it too much compression? Is it the rebound, too much rebound, so it's packed down? Or, where am I? If I could come back from the rides and know that I'd bottomed it out once or twice, or I could hit something hard, feel like a bottom out, but you can look on the shaft and you're at 90% travel or something. Would give me a bit more confidence that I'm doing the right thing. Even measuring the static sag, it's really, you can't, it's like a 2-person job. You need someone to help you, and it's and changing the springs a pain in the backside. You got to take the shock out of the frame and then take off these circlips. Like a nightmare. Give me an air shock every day.
Well, maybe we should switch you out to an air shock at some point. We'll have to have a chat with Geordie. But yeah, I know what you mean. It would be amazing if someone could create some sort of some kind of vision device that tells you how much travel you got out of the shock during the run. It makes you realize how useful that is on an air shock. I know Canyon used to have a little mark on one of the linkages, so you could see where 30% was at least, so you could check your sag a bit easier. That seems to have gone. I'm not sure why they've done that, but they are more work for sure. An air shock makes life a lot easier, but the bike's feeling good though in general. Right?
Yeah, I'd been moaning about the bars a bit as well. I couldn't get. I like the bars.
Yeah, you said handlebars.
Trail bike. I like the bars turned up a bit, and I'd been trying that with the Johnny's going, yeah. I've been trying that with the Canyon bars, and they just felt awful. And I'd got to the point where I'd actually ordered a set of the same bars that I've got on my trail bike. I was like, God, I'm just going to fit these at the bars. Anyway, I was like, I'll have one last go, and I rolled them back a bit further than I thought, and they just felt spot on. So they're gonna stay now.
Fair enough. Yeah, bar roll is a tricky one, right? I always just get on a bike, sit on it, and move it to where it feels right, but I don't really know. I've never measured that, or I don't know if it's the same between bikes or whether it varies for me depending on what I'm sat
Pretty
on.
tricky one to measure, really. Yeah, definitely a feel
There
thing.
is just a right feeling, I guess. But
yeah.
Cool. Where have you ended up on pedals? Because we had the option, you're a flat pedal rider, you had the option of the Stamp 7s in small or large. Did you manage to try both?
I've got the large ones. On just for that bit of slightly. I mean, they still fit. You can't see them under the shoe. They don't stick out at the edges. Just a little bit more platform to like aim at if you have a sketchy moment and need a bit of need to plonk the foot back on somewhere. So I've gone with those. There's a couple of pins like on the end of the body, sort of like inside the outside edge of the pedal that I've taken off because I like that sort of concave feeling of chopping your foot in. Do
you think they feel more grippy with those pins out?
I think they feel better. Yeah, maybe I don't know about grip, but it just feels more secure under the foot. I think without that. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I've gone with the bigger of the pedals as well. I tried it initially on the small pedal, and it was before we got the Fox stuff, so we didn't have the Fox shoes, and I felt like my feet were like skipping a bit. And when the pedals are like, I was like, well, if I've got a bigger pedal, if it skips, I'm not going to get to a point where this feels sketchy. So I ended up putting the bigger pedals on. I just really like them, so they've stayed on the bike.
It's a good combo, that shoe and that pedal. Yeah, like
grippy as works for me. Grips, you're sticking. Have you tried anything? I guess you've not had time to mess about with stuff at that sort of level.
Changed the grips actually. Yeah.
Have you? So, okay, because you were on the AG1 initially.
They felt quite hard.
They're really thin, so there's not much room for any rubber.
So I've gone to the Elite ones, which are like knurled with some like something to grip your fingers on the underside.
Yeah, ODI
feel a little
Elite
bit softer.
Pro. Yeah.
So I'm going to stick with those.
Did you make some kind of modification?
Yeah, so they've got like a kind of like a lip on the outside. I guess some people would like to have that feeling where the edge of the bar is, but I've just skimmed that off with some snips. So it's like constant circumference all the way out. I like to have my hands right on the edge of the bars. So
okay. Yeah. I know a few people that like to ride like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Cool. Not messed about with brake levers or anything like that yet. We're getting into the weeds a bit if you've only had 2 or 3 rides.
I had a go. I was like, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know what the stock levers are. They've got quite a hook on the end, and I'm not that keen on that. I like to have my fingers on kind of on like the edge of the brake lever as well, and that hook kind of makes them quite short. So I had a look at fitting the longer, flatter ones. I'm not sure which version they are. It actually looks quite straightforward. I just couldn't figure out one bit to expose the pin that you need to tap out. But I think
you just need to lift it off. You take it.
Yeah.
You just flick it off. It's stuck on, and then it's like remains tacky and sticks back on. It's just a little cover. So
I might do that before we race. Actually,
do it. We'll do it on the morning of the race.
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah. Perfect.
No, they're all good. Right. There, I think. Even if the levers stay as they are, quite happy with them. Really. Yeah.
Yeah, I prefer. Yeah, the HE wide has got like less of a hook on the end of the lever, and that's the Bruni one, which I've been running like ever since I started using them on the trail bike. That they were my favorite. And I'm sure I've said on the podcast before, but like they've totally changed the way I set up a brake. Like I used to like having the bite point really close to the bar, and with those, like I set them to the point where the lever is parallel with the bar when it bites. And that's actually like quite a long way out, which if you speak to someone like Fabian Burrell, he's like, oh, that's the way you should brake because it's less arduous on your finger and you've got better feel by controlling it with a tip than like using your whole finger to brake. So I've been riding like that for a couple of years now, or a year and a bit. And I find I get less arm fatigue and stuff doing it. So seems to work. So yeah, I stuck the Bruni lever straight on. Johnny, you've gone the opposite way with bike setup and just throw money at the problem, right?
A little bit, yeah.
Go on, talk us through it.
So I think I was faced with exactly the same problem. I didn't know where to start, really. I had my son help me to measure the sag with a ruler. And, we thought it was coming out about right. But I decided I was going to get a professional involved and help me sort it out. So I got Rich Simpson from RSR Bikeworks, who's been on the pod, to help me. And we kind of know each other through you, given that we're of, he's slightly older than us, but we used to race kind of together-ish back in the day. So I contacted him, we sorted out a date, and which was about a week or so after the last podcast. So we sorted out a place to go, rocked up. I'd actually taken my bike to him to begin with, actually, because there was a slight issue with the fork in that you'd mentioned that it wasn't quite feeling right. And it felt like to me that changing the compression didn't do anything, both high speed and low speed. So he said there's quite often an issue, so he could have a look and potentially sort it out, which he did. And it turns out that there was a lot of grease in one leg and no grease in the other leg, and the grease was blocking up the air valve. So he basically took the grease from one side, rolled it around all the bushes on the other side, and put it where it should be. Job done. And that meant that he could fit so he uses Motion Instruments data logging gear. So he was able to fit that ahead of time so that when he turned up, here we could just kind of crack on. So hop on the bike. So he's got the little app on his phone, and he's like, right, hop on and we'll measure the sag. 37%. I thought it was
no way. And you'd measured it at 30?
No, I'd measured it at 26, which is what Troy Brosnan runs. So I was like, yeah, look, happy days. And I was like 10% over. And he's like, oh, okay. I said, look, I've got another spring. And so we swapped it out. So we went from a 400 to a 450. And then we were, I've got the notes here. We were 27% on that 450. But it felt, sitting on it with no changes to the clickers, it felt hard. Like it felt firm. Like, not what I would have thought was right. So back to Ben's comments about it felt too hard. Maybe it wasn't, but it
felt too hard just sitting on the bike statically, skating about it.
Yeah, it felt like it wasn't what I would expect. I would have expected it to sit more into.
It doesn't go like downhill.
Yeah, I'm thinking like, this is,
So just for
this was the first part of going down this massive rabbit hole. He can measure the sag accurately, and it was fine. That was we were in a good spot. The front was in a good spot already because it has an O-ring on, so it's quite easy to do. So then we went and rode. So we went to a track that he knows. I didn't. And then we just started doing runs. And he'd have, I carried the phone, which was connected to the equipment. And then at the bottom of each run, we get into the habit of him asking me questions, and then looking at the data and making changes. And then to begin with, it's about me learning the track and kind of getting up to speed, and then Rich making the obvious changes. So initially he's looking to get the balance right, and then the speed the suspension's working out right, which he can view from the data logging. And then it's kind of like this just slow ebb and back and forth to kind of get you, because you make a change to one end, and then that has an effect on the other. So if you make the back too soft, you're then sitting into the back of the bike. So the front's then not getting as much travel because your weight has shifted back. And rather than thinking, it's the problem with the fork because I'm not getting enough travel, it's not. It's a problem with the back because you're sitting too far into the travel. So because he's got all that data, he can then say, right, we actually need to do this. So for me, it was very counterintuitive to begin with, that if I'm feeling a problem with the forks, it's not necessarily a problem with the forks. And to be honest, the forks were a lot quicker to get into the right ballpark than the rear end. So we kept doing that, and I then got up to the point where I was quick enough on the track to feel as if I was at a pace where I could. The bike was in the window of where I wanted it to work, and I guess the tricky thing is you need to ride fast enough that the bike's in that window, but you still need to be cognizant of the thought process of thinking about what the bike's doing. Because normally when I get up to a certain pace, I stop thinking and I just focused on, the track ahead, and I'm, there's not actually any conscious thoughts going through my head. Whereas this time, I had to kind of like hit record, and then at the bottom, like replay the run, thinking what was going on, and then base that feedback, and then pass that to Rich. And so this was the most interesting thing for me, was that, so a couple of times it would feel like the bike was understeering, and it wouldn't turn into a corner. And I get this quite often on other bikes, and I just think, it's just me. It's just it's just that day, or it's just the bike. I have no idea. Turns out it's the bike. So he's like, okay, so I give him the feedback, and he then look at the data, and he goes, yeah, that kind of, I can see what you're saying based on the data. And then he'd make a change, and the next round I'm like, it's completely different. And he's like,
so what did he change to improve your understeer issue on that day?
So when it was understeering, it would also feel like the fork was chattery. So and the fork had, no setting could change on the fork, say, but in a straight line, it would feel, I'd get more feedback. And so Rich said, that's actually because you're not sitting in the right part of the travel. You're sitting too far back, and you're in the very beginning part of the travel. So most people might think, well, I need to change the fork. And he says, no, but you're sitting too far back. So he's adding then basically low speed compression
to the rear end.
To the rear end. I'll quickly add, we worked on the rebound initially to get the speeds right. And then once the speeds were correct, we didn't touch those. And we just worked on the compression between the front and the rear to get the balance. And then, we got to the point where, I didn't have to think about what the bike was doing. It just went where I wanted it to go. And it was the fact that you can change one click once you're in the kind of that window. I was like, and for me, the whole process was, I've put a bit of time in over the years trying to get my head around setting up suspension. I've watched videos, and I felt I've never really got anywhere, because there's always been a lot of hand waving. And whereas Rich, he comes from an engineering background, I've got an engineering, well, we all have engineering backgrounds, and he's got this kind of scientific process of feedback change. And, it's basically bracketing, but with actual data. You're not just basing it off my feel. He's like, well, what does the feel mean in terms of numbers? So not only did we get the bike set up, I ended up with this education in suspension, which I actually feel as if I know to a reasonable extent what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I was going to say, is the best part of the day the fact that you've got some base settings that you're happy with, or the fact that you now know the process and have a really good feel? Like, the first time I rode with data on a bike, I found the best thing really was like being able to correlate my feeling with data.
Yeah.
Because then you start to learn to trust your intuition and know, okay, when I feel that, it's probably like, so even now if I ride a bike without data on, I've got more confidence in what I'm feeling and what I want to do about it than I did before I did that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So I've then, so my other bike, my e-bike, I've just done exactly the same thing. I've taken that process through, and have, and admittedly there's far less things to turn and change and get wrong, but I've applied that kind of same approach, and then thinking about what the bike's doing, and how I'm riding the bike, and it's made a massive difference to that bike. And that bike rode really well, I thought, to begin with, but it's and some of it comes down to the weight of the rider, the type, the length of the levers of the rider, how a given rider rides. At our age as well, I think I don't think we had this problem when we were younger, because the window in which a bike works for us was so wide, and we were young, we were flexible, fit, And now that window is shrunk because of either, age, time constraints, overthinking, or what have you. And I can now understand how I can get that window back into the right place. So
yeah,
it's been, I couldn't recommend it enough. And we then gossiped about mountain biking racing and everything in between. So,
which I'm sure you loved.
Yeah, I was absolutely knackered by the end of the day. I think we did like 10 or 11 runs, pushing back up each time. So, bushed.
Good work. So explain this to me. You're 3 kilos heavier than me, and you're running the same fork pressure with 0 spaces in the fork.
0 tokens, yeah. I've got a theory on this, though.
Come on, then.
So, so I don't want a progressive bike. I don't want a progressive curve. I want the spring rate to be the same all the way through the travel. I don't want it to change the feeling of the bike at any point in time.
Can you give your reasoning for that?
Because it's predictable.
Okay.
If it changes at the end, you'll only ever get that to that end point of the travel, maybe a couple of times. So how do you then have the experience of how to handle the bike when the spring rate changes if you're not spending any time there? Whereas if you're getting there and it behaves just the same as the rest of the travel, then you do know how it's going to behave. I caveat this is just my theory. This is just me. I might be completely wrong. But so I wanted that, and the same at the back. And I thought back from bikes I'd had a long time ago, and I'd always done better on the bikes that had a more linear feel. I also thought that I want the compression circuit to actually do the job. And anyone who tells me that the compression is designed to work open, I think that's utter bullshit, if I'm honest, because how can you then make a change beyond that open to see if you need more or less? Or less even. So, it's the compression's there to do a job. So really, I would imagine the compression needs to be in the middle, and then you can make changes up or down. Why would you ever want it at the limit? So
yeah, I agree. Yeah, ideally, you want the perfect situation is that for every person at every weight and every riding style, all your clickers are in the middle most of the time, and you deviate one way or the other depending on conditions or track
exactly
whatever. Yeah, very, very hard to do as a manufacturer, but yeah.
One of the other things Rich provides is he says how to change your suspension in different conditions. So if you've got a steep track, if you're on a flat track that's pumpy, if it's wet, if it's cold, so you've got little changes to make. And I was always of the opinion, you watch the World Cup races and they're like, I think I need one more click of high speed or one more click of low speed. And I was like, really? Can you really notice that? And unfortunately, I know I can now. So,
but that's good though, right? Like, it's good that you're sensitive to that. It gives you the ability to but yeah, it's a double-edged sword, right?
Yes.
It opens up the puzzle.
Yeah,
I'm going to use that word, Ben. I know you don't like it.
I heard gains slip in earlier as well, but I let it by.
The Z words are creeping in. Yeah, but equally then it gives you that opportunity to optimize and to get the bike in a really good spot.
Yeah, and also you're understanding what the changes are doing. I think that was the big thing for me. It's like, rather than saying, I know I need to do this because this is what I've been told, I can now think, right, this is how I'm feeling on the bike. This is what I think I need to change to correct that issue. Change it, do another run, and has it had the desired effect? So after post doing this with Rich, I've been out riding on the bike at a different location, which was not, say, as steep, and I could notice that the bike didn't feel handled quite the same. So I then made the appropriate change, and it brought the bike back into that window of feeling the same. So, which was kind of testament to what Richard taught me and the process, basically.
And then you crashed it.
Yeah, that's just a crash.
You don't crash though, Johnny,
no,
unless you're starting to push.
Everyone says this, and I crash all the time. I might not tell you about it. Yeah, and I'll crash, and then some of our other friends are like, look, Johnny crashed. And I'm like, I crash all the time.
I can only remember seeing you crash once.
Maybe I'm so far ahead, I crash, get back on the bike, and carry on.
Heel.
That's probably it. That's probably it, mate, to be fair. With me anyway, that's probably it.
Yeah.
Cool. I'll go through my setup a bit then. So like I said, I shamelessly copied the Canyon factory team because I figured they've done the work. So O-chain's gone on. Love it. Definitely feel less feedback through the pedals. Just generally it feels less rough and everything feels a bit more open. So I really like that. Pretty simple change. What else have we done? We've gone to the longer rear end. So I mentioned this last time that it was something that I wanted to try, and I tried it at Antistiniog. So my theory is not that I was struggling with front end, but I always find like if the front end of a bike sticks, you're going to ride better. Like if you turn in and you know the front's coming with you, everything's rosy, give or take. Like it's a nice situation to be in when you feel like you just can't rattle the front end of a bike. And by lengthening the rear end, it's going to put more weight over the front of the bike. Because you're lengthening the wheelbase. If you stay in the same place, then you're closer to the front of the bike than you were previously. Effectively, you're weighing the front more. So I wanted to try that. We've got that 10 mil adjust on the swing arm, super easy to do. Literally like 2-minute job. So I did that, rode it at Stiniog, and it did surprisingly feel quite different. But it's definitely for the better for me, I think. Like it feels more stable at high speed. Everyone tells me Ridderfellen, which is where we're racing, is really fast. So that's no bad thing. There was one tight left-hander there that I initially struggled to get around. And I just think that was me riding badly. Like once I got the hang of that turn, it was totally fine. So I don't really see any massive downside to it. There aren't many like gnarly endo turns on downhill tracks these days. So I don't think that maneuverability thing is actually a real downside. And I feel like it's helped the front end feel like it's going to stick, whether that's in my head or not.
Would you go longer on the front with the cups?
No, I wouldn't go longer on the front with the cups. I find if the reach gets too long, then that problem. I always, in my head, I'm thinking, well, if you pull the reach forward, it's going to pull me forward. I'm going to have more weight on the front, but equally, you've put the front further away from you as well. Yeah. So I think it has the opposite effect. But I always struggle. I struggle to get my head around that one. But when I've tried it, when we did that strive testing, I couldn't ride that thing in the long. Like I really found it hard to keep the front end in check. Whereas in the middle, and then even better in the short version of it, I found it better. So yeah, I'm going to stick in the middle. It's where I've always ridden that bike, and it's felt good. I don't really want to mess about with that too much. So that was a change that I made. And then as soon as your day finished with Rich, I would message Rich and was like, Rich, send me Johnny's settings. So I wanted to see what you'd been up to. And our forks, other than the fact that you've got 0 spaces and I've got, or whatever you want to call them, I'm going to call them spaces, 2 spaces in the fork. You've got none. But
so I would add that I brought the tokens with me, expecting to be recommended to put them back in. Rich brought tokens as well on that same basis, and he was a little bit surprised because none of the data suggested that we needed to do it.
Yeah, I was wondering about this because I was asking Rich, like, the fact that we've got the same fork pressure and you're running less spaces, but I weigh less. I was like, am I just riding more forward on the bike than Johnny is? Like, am I putting more weight through the bar? And he was like, well, you ride flats and Johnny rides clips, so it's unlikely. And I was like, that was a bit of a puzzle for me. But I think that's because when you're on flats, you're naturally dipping your heel, so you're behind the axle of the pedal, which is going to pull you back a bit. I assume that's what he's getting at with that. So I can't quite get my head around it. But to me,
my forks are slightly broken.
Maybe. I bottomed it out like once or twice when we were sending it into those braking bumps at Stiniog.
Yeah.
But broadly speaking, I'm getting. You haven't?
No.
Mad, eh?
Yeah.
Don't know what's going on there.
Just a light rider.
Maybe just a good rider. But our fork settings
that.
were broadly similar, like on both compression and rebound within a click here and there. So that was pretty similar. The biggest change, rebound was fairly similar on the rear end. Obviously, your spring rate's heavier.
So I'd expect my rebound to have slightly more rebound.
Yeah, I've taken account for that. So you've got more rebound damping from a clicks perspective, but like taking into account a heavier spring.
Yeah.
But compression settings we can compare, and you were running a lot more high-speed compression and a little bit more low-speed compression. So I queried Rich on the high-speed compression side, and he said he'd done a setup on another of the new senders with a much lighter rider, and it also ended up with relatively high-speed compression on the rear end. So I was like, well, I should go and try it, like see how it feels. So I think I mentioned this on the last episode of the podcast. The first time I rode the bike, I felt like I was like getting bucked on jumps. I felt like the back end was trying to kick. And we combated that by slowing down the high-speed rebound on the rear to try and bring the bike into control a bit. So I had this thought like, if I increase the high-speed compression damping when I'm coming into these like takeoffs, which is a compression event, will the bike kind of squat less into the travel if I've got more high-speed compression, and therefore I won't get bucked as much. And maybe I can then open the high-speed rebound a bit and take some benefits from that. Anyway, so I went to Dovey this week just gone to do the O-chain test and to try that. And I initially went to, I think, 4 clicks from closed on high-speed compression from being pretty open. And the bike felt more composed, way less like kicky, but it did feel a little bit more harsh. Like even with the benefit of the O-chain, it still felt like a bit more harsh through hits. So I backed off 1 click. So I'm now 5 from closed on the high-speed circuit on the back. And the bike, it definitely feels better. Like I'm not getting kicked around on it. It just feels more composed in rough stuff in general, which I think is a benefit. So I'm going to go with that.
I ended up with another set of settings from Rich. Yeah. So at the end, we just tried something completely different, and we went to a very like high compression setup on the rear end, which I've then subsequently worked on a bit too, because we didn't have the time to get the balance quite right, with going from a open on low speed to 8. So that's pretty much beyond halfway, and slightly less on the high speed compression. And what I find is that I really like that setting, but there's a lot of feedback through the pedals. But the stability is just unbelievable. And you
need to go get yourself an O-chain. Because that honestly, I think that would fix that. I think that for me, I'm like, I can get away with this higher compression setting, especially on flat pedals, because that's even more likely to cause an issue because I've got the O-chain on there, to be fair. Like, I think I'm trading off those two things against each other. Like,
interesting.
Got more like open feel, less harshness because of the O-chain, and then in that case I can wind up the high speed and not suffer so much, maybe.
But I'm just referencing my little data sheet here, but anyway, why I keep looking off camera.
Fair enough. And then the other thing I wanted to try was grips. So ODI just launched a new grip called the Reflex, I think, which is supposed to be like the most vibration dampening grip ever made. And they sent some over, so I thought I'd give those a try. And it was kind of hard because I was riding with this shoulder injury. So like the first couple of runs were horrific because I was riding so tight on the bike anyway that my arms were just like not feeling particularly good. I did settle in a bit before I started making changes to the bike. I did like manage to settle in and loosen up. And I don't know. I feel like when I put those grips on, I was getting less arm fatigue, but maybe again, I was still like on that transition into my body warming up and being able to like settle into the bike a bit more or get more confident on the track. I don't know, but they definitely didn't feel worse. So I think I'm going to keep them on. And again, it's odd, right? Because I've gone from riding really thin grips. I've got quite small hands, and I've always thought thin grips are a good thing. That ODI Elite Pro, Ben, that you're running is, for me, quite a thick grip, but I really like it. And I find the the give in the shaping on it really helpful. And then this grip's even thicker again, or it feels thicker under the palm, but it's so much of it's like moves. There's so much kind of ribbing and shaping and stuff that, it just seems to absorb vibration. So I'm going to stick with that. And that's it. I'm not changing anything. I'm not touching it. I'm not even going to clean it. Yeah. So I think it's ready, broadly speaking.
Good.
Needs to be.
That's scary, isn't it?
Needs to be.
It does need to be. So yeah, first race, literally days away. It's been cool actually. Quite a lot of people like that do the series or that are racing in the UK have been in touch in the last week or 2 weeks since we launched the project. Like everyone seems pretty into it and stoked that we're doing it. So it's cool. It's going to be weird swanning around with our names on our backs at the race. But yeah, Ben, how are you feeling now that we're getting pretty close to it?
I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to it now. I've chilled out a bit. I'm taking the approach of Saturdays is a nice day of uplift and ragging it hard down one track as well. None of this uplift days where you like ride 8 tracks once. It's like I really enjoy like getting on something and having a session on it. So, and I'll go out and I'll go out and do that around, locally. I'll have a session ride where I just stick to one track and see what I can do on it. So I'm looking forward to that. Sunday, I'm not so sure about. I'm not sure how I'm going to feel in the start hut or at the start line. I think I'm going to be levels of anxiousness above what I would normally be at an enduro race.
Why do you think that is? What's different about it being a downhill rather than an enduro for you?
I think we sort of talked about this last time, didn't we? That like an enduro, start of a stage on an enduro, you've got that fallback. Well, I can stuff this up. I can have a crash here, and most people are going to have one instant on their way around the whole thing. Or even if this is a disaster, I've got 4 other stages to let loose on through the day. And
it's Pierce though, so you've got 2 race runs.
Yeah, you got 2 race runs. Yeah, I don't know how to. It'd be interesting to see how.
It's just a short enduro.
It's
a short enduro, and all the tracks are the same.
See, I don't. There's a lot to find out and work out, isn't there?
Best run wins.
Is it best run? Is it best run wins, or don't you?
Yeah, it's best run
for
wins
the day.
And most people
don't you get points for the series from both your runs? Maybe.
Oh, interesting. I haven't read that deeply.
I'm not
into
sure.
The rule
I might
yet.
be wrong on that, but just that was my impression.
We're not in it for the series though. We're just in it for the individual races.
This is true.
True. We only got the 2 rounds.
This is true.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it'd be nice to meet a bunch of new people. I feel like an outsider actually, which is a weird.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Situation to be in for someone who's been in the sport for like 35 years or whatever. I do feel like a bit of an outsider at a downhill race, so I'm sure we'll be welcomed.
We'll find out. What about you, Johnny?
Just excited. Yeah, looking forward to finally getting the bike on a downhill track and doing some uplifts, and be good fun, I think.
You've already cooked our Saturday night dinner. Good lad.
Yeah, getting planned. Sorted my toolbox out, cleaned some stuff up. Still finding mud in that helmet from the photo shoot, despite me trying to clean it out. It dries, and I'm like, oh my God, it's still there.
Good effort. What are you doing this week then, as far as like prep, training, rest? What are your approaches, Ben? Start with you. Busy with work?
I've got a busy week at work. I've got a couple of nights away. I'm off up to see my parents for a couple of days. So I'm probably not going to get in the gym, but I would have only done like a real gentle session maybe early in the week in the gym. I take my bike So we'll get a trail ride on Tuesday. Something
Nice.
fairly gentle. Just trying to rest and get some quality sleep as well, especially whilst I'm away from home.
Yeah, make the most of that. No kids to keep you awake. What about you, Johnny?
A similar, I think. I've been trying to. So since I finished doing the block of training, I've just been kind of freestyling it a bit and trying to get out on the bike more, as you said, Chris. So this week, I've not really decided. I think I'm going to go out on the bike once. I might just keep moving.
On the downhill bike?
No, not on the downhill
Okay.
bike. I'm not going to go out on that again. Just keep moving, and then I might just keep the legs moving on Thursday and Friday, and just grease the groove and roll into the weekend. I think sit in a car for 4 or 5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
That is the downside for you, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's quite a long drive. Cool, man. Well, I'm super excited for it, Ben. I definitely share the nerves to some extent, I think, but I'm going to try and put that aside. And
stressed or nervous?
I'm not stressed. No, I wouldn't say I'm stressed about it. I would say I'm a bit nervous about it. Like, I think there's an element of we are outsiders rocking up to something, but we're also doing it in a very public.
No recent experience whatsoever.
Yeah, exactly. But we've got really good kit.
All the gear.
Awesome bikes. All the gear, no idea. All the gear, and some idea. We've got a little bit. We've done some work.
We've got a plan.
I've done as much work as I could have done in the last 6 months, whatever, right? I've trained when I could train. I've ridden bikes when I can ride bikes. I've got the bike set up as best as I know how, and it feels pretty good. It looks pretty good. I was scanning through slow-mo videos from Dovey, just checking what the bike was doing and trying to work out whether it was good or bad. But I think it looks pretty good. So yeah, I mean, as good a spot as I can be. If I can't go and enjoy a race and have a good crack at it now, then I've got no hope. So I might as well go.
So you've nailed your process.
Up to this point, it might all go completely to pot when we turn up at a race and I get spooked by it. But I think it'll depend on the track for me. Like, if I groove with the track straight away and I'm not too intimidated by any of it, I think I'll probably be right. I'll have a pretty good weekend. But if I find there's something or a couple of bits that I'm real nervous of, or I think that will be the thing that could throw me. Whereas if the tracks to me feels relatively straightforward or achievable, then I'll probably be all right. Don't know. Find out, won't we?
We will.
Nice one. All right. Well, it's going to be fun seeing you in person. We'll record some chat over the weekend, probably post-practice and post-race for everyone, so they can hear what's going on in our heads and how we're actually getting on at the event. But yeah, until Friday, have a good week. And look forward to seeing you at the weekend for some actual bike riding together.
Yeah.
Nice one. All right. Cheers, boys.
Go. See ya.
See ya.